Claire had always been the quiet one in the family, the one who worked hard but rarely got noticed. Jenna, on the other hand, seemed to float through life effortlessly. She was beautiful, charming, and every little thing she did seemed to earn praise from their parents. Claire tried to be happy for her, but inside, a small voice whispered that it wasn't fair. That voice grew louder with every award, every compliment, every smile aimed at Jenna while Claire stayed in the shadows. The night of the family gathering, Claire's patience finally snapped. It wasn't a huge argument or a dramatic event. It was something simple, almost insignificant. Jenna had accidentally spilled a drink on one of Claire's carefully prepared projects for a charity auction. Everyone laughed it off, thinking it was a harmless accident, but Claire felt a fire ignite inside her. That moment, small as it was, made her realize how invisible she had always felt. She could no longer ignore the sting of being overlooked, dismissed, and forgotten. Claire didn't lash out that night. She smiled politely, excused herself, and went to her room, letting Jenna enjoy the attention she always seemed to get. But as she sat alone, her mind began to race. She thought about all the times she had helped Jenna with schoolwork, family projects, even personal problems, without ever receiving recognition. She thought about the times she had stayed up late helping Jenna prepare for a recital or a speech, while her own achievements were ignored. The anger she had suppressed for years began to bubble up, turning into something sharper, something that demanded action. That night, Claire made a quiet decision. She wasn't going to hurt her sister physically or publicly humiliate her. But she would make sure that Jenna could no longer rise above her at every turn without consequences. Claire began to pay closer attention to Jenna's habits, her routines, and even the little mistakes she often overlooked. She started keeping track, mentally cataloging every slight, every opportunity where Jenna's charm could fail her. Claire didn't share this with anyone, not even her closest friends. This was something she had to navigate alone. For the first time, Claire felt a strange combination of fear and excitement. The fear came from the idea of acting against her own sister, someone she loved in her own complicated way. The excitement came from knowing that, finally, she could take control of her own story, rather than being a background character in Jenna's life. That small incident at the family gathering had sparked more than anger, it had sparked clarity. Claire knew she had to be smart, patient, and careful. One wrong move, and the situation could spiral beyond her control. As she lay in bed that night, Claire realized that this was only the beginning. The resentment she had buried for so long was no longer dormant. It had grown into a quiet, burning determination. Something had to change, and if the world wouldn't see her, she would make them. She would make Jenna see her, and in the process, maybe the whole family too. The next steps weren't clear yet, but one thing was certain: Claire's life, and Jenna's, was about to take a turn that nobody could have predicted. Claire tried to celebrate Jenna's successes, but it wasn't easy. When Jenna received a full scholarship to a prestigious university, the room buzzed with excitement. Their parents couldn't stop praising her, telling her how proud they were. Claire clapped politely, smiled, and offered congratulations, but inside, a sharp pang of jealousy cut through her chest. She remembered the countless nights she had spent studying just as hard, the endless hours she had put into her own projects, and the sacrifices no one ever noticed. At work, it was the same. Claire had helped Jenna prepare for a major promotion at the family business, providing research, drafting reports, and even rehearsing presentations. Yet when the promotion was announced, Jenna's name was called, and she received all the applause. Claire had done so much of the groundwork, but everyone, including Jenna, acted as if it had been her effort alone. The disappointment was crushing, and the anger started to simmer under the surface. Even at home, little things reminded Claire of how invisible she had become. On Jenna's birthday, their parents gave her a thoughtful gift she had suggested months earlier. They praised her for the idea, calling it creative and perfect. Claire's contributions to the family were rarely acknowledged. Every compliment Jenna received felt like a small cut, each recognition a reminder that Claire's efforts went unseen. She loved her sister, she really did, but it was impossible not to feel betrayed by life and the people she trusted most. Claire tried to hide her feelings, to act normal, but it was getting harder. She caught herself comparing everything she did with Jenna, measuring achievements, and feeling inadequate every time. She questioned whether it was jealousy or something deeper. Part of her wanted to step back, accept her role, and let Jenna have her moment. But another part of her refused. That part felt like it had been silenced for too long, and it was finally demanding to be heard. The tension grew silently inside Claire. She wanted to express her feelings, to tell someone how unfair everything felt, but she didn't know how. Telling Jenna might hurt her or make her angry. Telling their parents would seem petty, and they probably wouldn't understand. So Claire kept her emotions bottled up, letting them build like a storm gathering strength. Despite the anger and jealousy, Claire also felt guilt. She knew that Jenna had done nothing wrong intentionally. She was just talented, confident, and naturally charismatic. Loving her sister while resenting her felt like carrying two opposite emotions at the same time, and it left Claire restless and exhausted. She couldn't just accept being invisible, but she also didn't want to lose the bond with the person she had grown up with, shared secrets with, and cared for deeply. By the end of the day, Claire realized that something had to change. She could no longer stay quiet and watch her life be overshadowed. The quiet resentment had grown into a strong determination. She had to find a way to make herself seen, not with anger alone, but with careful thought and strategy. The first steps weren't clear yet, but the tension inside her promised that her life, and her relationship with Jenna, was about to reach a breaking point. One afternoon, Claire was helping their parents organize old documents in the study when she stumbled across something she wasn't supposed to see. Hidden at the back of a drawer was a stack of legal papers showing that Jenna had been given a significant inheritance from a distant relative. The amount was far more than Claire had ever imagined, enough to change Jenna's life completely. What made it worse was realizing that their parents had never mentioned it to her, not a word, not even a hint. The shock hit Claire like a punch to the chest. This wasn't just about being overlooked anymore. It was deeper. It was betrayal. She had always assumed that fairness was part of their family, that effort and loyalty mattered. Yet here was proof that favoritism ran deeper than she had known. Jenna had been set up to succeed in ways Claire could never compete with, and no one had thought to tell her. Claire's heart ached, but along with the pain came clarity. She couldn't change the inheritance, and she couldn't undo the unfairness of it. But she could protect herself. She could make sure she wasn't left behind, invisible and powerless. From that moment on, she began quietly planning. She would keep her feelings hidden, smile and act normal around everyone, and pretend everything was fine. No one could suspect that beneath her calm exterior, she was carefully observing, learning, and preparing. It wasn't about revenge yet, not fully. It was about survival, about making sure that if Jenna had advantages, Claire would find ways to level the field. She started paying attention to every detail, family routines, small financial decisions, and Jenna's personal habits. Each piece of information became a tool, a way to quietly protect herself while keeping the appearance of normalcy. Even as she planned, Claire struggled with her emotions. Part of her still loved her sister, and the thought of acting against her made her stomach twist. Yet another part, stronger than ever before, demanded that she take control of her own life. She realized that love and resentment could exist at the same time, and that sometimes, protecting yourself meant doing things that felt uncomfortable or even wrong. Claire also noticed how much the secret inheritance explained. Why Jenna always seemed confident, why their parents favored her, why it felt like Claire's efforts were never enough. It all made sense now, and the clarity sharpened her focus. She could no longer rely on hope or patience alone, she needed action, careful and calculated. That night, Claire lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the papers still fresh in her mind. The anger, the sense of betrayal, and the quiet determination all blended into a single resolve. She wasn't going to let life keep ignoring her. She wasn't going to be invisible anymore. The inheritance had opened her eyes, but it had also given her purpose. Claire would find a way to make her presence known, to make herself count, and to ensure that Jenna, and everyone else, could no longer overlook her. Something had changed in Claire that day. A new fire had been lit, one that was patient, careful, and unrelenting. She didn't know exactly how it would unfold, but she knew one thing: the balance of power in their family was about to shift, and she was ready to take the first step. Claire had always been careful, but now she began to put her plans into action. At first, it was small and almost unnoticeable. She would misplace important documents Jenna needed for work or remind her of meetings at the wrong times. She never did anything obvious, just enough to make Jenna struggle quietly. At home, she would forget to pass along messages or slightly rearrange schedules so that Jenna would run late for appointments. Jenna, as always, smiled through it. She never suspected Claire had anything to do with the mishaps. She thanked her for help when she could, laughed off mistakes, and treated Claire with warmth. Watching her sister remain so kind and trusting made Claire's heart twist in a confusing way. Part of her felt proud, almost victorious. But another part felt sharp guilt for deliberately making Jenna's life harder. The small disruptions began to pile up. A missed meeting led to a delay in a big project at work. A forgotten note meant a personal favor Jenna had counted on went wrong. Each time, Claire told herself it was for balance, a way to level the playing field after years of being overlooked. But she also couldn't shake the heavy feeling in her chest, knowing that her actions were hurting someone she loved. Claire started noticing patterns in how Jenna relied on others. She discovered the small cracks in her sister's routine, the tiny mistakes that no one else would see. Every detail became a step she could take to gain some control over the imbalance that had defined her life. She kept meticulous mental notes, planning ahead for the next opportunity. Despite her carefulness, Claire's emotions were a constant battle. She wanted to see Jenna falter, to finally have the satisfaction of recognition and fairness. Yet every time Jenna smiled at her, trusting and affectionate, Claire's chest tightened. She felt the contradiction, love and resentment existing together, battling inside her like a storm. The guilt gnawed at her, but the desire for justice, for acknowledgement, drove her to continue. Sometimes, she caught herself imagining what it would feel like if Jenna suddenly realized what was happening. The thought made her pause, filled her with fear, and yet a strange thrill ran through her. She had to be careful, one wrong move, and everything could collapse. Claire didn't want to destroy her sister completely, she just wanted to make sure that for once, the attention and praise weren't always going to go to Jenna. As the days went by, the snowball effect grew. Minor inconveniences turned into bigger complications. Jenna's confidence wavered slightly, and Claire could see the stress on her sister's face. Yet Jenna never blamed her. Instead, she sought solutions and kept trying, unaware that the very person closest to her was behind the growing challenges. By the end of the week, Claire realized that this was more than just small acts. This was the beginning of change, a slow but steady shift in the balance between them. She was testing boundaries, testing herself, and testing how much she could influence without revealing her hand. The tension inside her grew, a mix of triumphant fear, guilt, and determination. Claire knew that this phase was just the start. The conflicts she had started would continue to escalate, and soon, the consequences would be bigger than either sister could predict. The real challenge, she realized, was keeping control over not just the situation, but over her own emotions as well. The family had gathered for Sunday dinner, the table full of laughter, the clatter of dishes, and the smell of roasted chicken. Claire tried to stay calm, keeping her usual polite smile, but beneath it, tension coiled tightly. She was listening quietly as Jenna talked about her plans for the coming months. Then, her heart dropped. Jenna casually mentioned a business opportunity that Claire had spent years researching and preparing for. Every detail she spoke about, the contacts, the strategy, the timing, was something Claire had worked on tirelessly, often alone, often hoping that one day her parents or Jenna would notice. But now, Jenna spoke as if it were her own idea, her own achievement waiting to happen. Claire felt something inside her snap. Years of being ignored, of working behind the scenes, of seeing her sister praised for things she barely tried at, everything came crashing down in a single, suffocating wave. Her chest tightened, her hands trembled, and she couldn't hold back any longer. Words that had been bottled up for years poured out in a sharp, unfiltered rush. Jenna. How can you even talk about this as if it's yours? Do you have any idea how long I've been working on this? How hard I've sacrificed for it? Claire's voice shook, loud enough to turn heads across the table. Her parents froze, forks halfway to their mouths, stunned at the intensity of her outburst. Jenna blinked in surprise, then laughed nervously, trying to lighten the tension. Claire, I didn't know. I just thought. Thought what? Claire cut in, her voice rising. That you could just take everything I worked for? That I wouldn't notice? That I don't matter? Tears pricked her eyes, and for the first time, she let them show. The anger, the hurt, and the betrayal she had carried for so long spilled into the room, raw and unstoppable. Their parents exchanged worried glances, silent and shocked. They had never seen Claire this furious, never heard her speak like this. The house felt smaller, the walls closing in with the tension of unspoken years finally exposed. Jenna, stunned and guilty, tried to defend herself, but the words seemed hollow compared to the storm of emotion in Claire's voice. The confrontation lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. Claire's fury was a force that demanded attention, demanding acknowledgement of all the times she had been overlooked. And in that moment, the audience could feel the weight of every injustice she had silently endured. When Claire finally stepped back, breathing heavily, the room was silent. Jenna's eyes were wide, no longer confident, no longer charming, just raw, exposed. Claire's parents looked torn, realizing the depth of their favoritism and its consequences. The betrayal, the anger, the long-hidden resentment, all of it had erupted, and there was no turning back. Claire sat down slowly, her body trembling, but inside, a strange sense of relief began to form. She had finally spoken the words she had carried for years. The confrontation had shocked everyone, yes, but it had also made one thing clear: things between her and Jenna, and the family, would never be the same. Claire spent days replaying everything in her mind. The dinner had changed something inside her. She knew now that staying silent would only leave her vulnerable. If she wanted a future where she wasn't pushed aside, she had to protect herself. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about making sure she didn't lose everything she had worked for. She began to observe Jenna more closely, not with emotion, but with focus. At work, Claire noticed how Jenna often rushed through tasks, assuming things would work out the way they always had. Deadlines were sometimes ignored, details overlooked, and responsibilities quietly passed on to others. Claire didn't interfere this time. She simply paid attention. When a mistake happened, she saved proof. Emails, notes, unfinished reports, nothing dramatic, just facts. Outside of work, Claire noticed patterns too. Jenna trusted people easily and spoke freely, sometimes without thinking. She made promises she couldn't always keep and took shortcuts when things felt inconvenient. Claire didn't create these mistakes, she only documented them. That distinction mattered to her. It helped her sleep at night, even when guilt pressed heavy on her chest. Still, the emotional struggle never left. Some days, Claire watched Jenna laugh, carefree and unaware, and her resolve weakened. She remembered late nights talking as kids, shared secrets, and moments when Jenna had been kind without question. Those memories made Claire question herself. Was she going too far? Was this really justice, or just delayed revenge? But then reality would pull her back. Claire knew how fragile her position was. One wrong move from Jenna could cost Claire opportunities she had fought for years to earn. Protecting herself meant being prepared. She told herself that truth mattered, and if the truth hurt, it wasn't her fault. She wasn't lying or manipulating, she was waiting. Claire chose her timing carefully. She understood that exposing everything too early would only cause chaos. She needed a moment when the truth couldn't be ignored or brushed aside. A moment when the consequences would be undeniable. Until then, she played her role perfectly. She stayed polite, helpful, and calm. No one suspected a thing. The weight of secrecy was exhausting. Some nights, Claire stared at the ceiling, wondering how it had come to this. She hated that love and justice felt like they were pulling her in opposite directions. She didn't want to destroy her sister, but she couldn't let herself be destroyed either. As the evidence grew, so did her confidence. Claire felt prepared, steady, and clear-headed. She wasn't acting out of rage anymore. This was careful, intentional, and controlled. She promised herself that when the moment came, she would speak with facts, not emotions. For now, she waited. Every step she took brought her closer to a turning point she could no longer avoid. Claire knew that once the truth was revealed, there would be no going back. Whatever happened next would change their lives forever. And even though fear lingered, she was ready to face it, because this time, she refused to disappear. The day Claire had been waiting for finally arrived. The family and colleagues were gathered for a major event at the company, a celebration of recent achievements and future plans. Claire stayed calm on the outside, smiling politely and helping with last-minute details. Inside, her heart raced. She had rehearsed her words carefully, knowing that timing would be everything. When the moment came, she stepped forward. At first, the room thought she was making a simple announcement. But then Claire calmly laid out the evidence she had collected. Every mistake Jenna had made at work, every missed detail, every shortcut, every careless decision, Claire presented them clearly, without exaggeration or emotion. The room fell silent. Colleagues exchanged shocked glances. Their parents, who had always assumed Jenna was flawless, froze. Jenna's face turned pale. She tried to explain, to make excuses, but Claire didn't allow it. She had waited for this moment, and she would not be interrupted. The humiliation was immediate. Jenna, who had always seemed confident and untouchable, was now exposed. She stuttered, her voice weak, her usual charm gone. For the first time, the audience saw Jenna as vulnerable, unprepared, and fallible. But Claire wasn't finished. After detailing Jenna's errors, she paused and looked directly at everyone in the room. Then she spoke about herself. She told them about the years she had spent working behind the scenes, the sacrifices she had made, the projects she had completed without recognition, and the constant feeling of being invisible. She shared how she had silently supported Jenna through school, career, and family obligations, always putting her sister first, even when it hurt her own opportunities. The room was stunned. This was more than just a list of mistakes, it was a story of endurance, patience, and quiet suffering. People who had thought Claire was meek now saw her strength. Her voice trembled at times, but her words were firm and truthful. She showed that her actions were not born of hatred alone, but from years of being overlooked and unheard. Jenna could only stand there, speechless, as the reality sank in. The audience felt the emotional weight, the tension between love and resentment, betrayal and justice, pride and humility. Claire had not only exposed her sister but had revealed the hidden truth of her own life. Some of the family and colleagues looked ashamed, realizing how much they had ignored Claire. Others felt empathy for her, understanding the years of struggle she had quietly endured. The mixture of humiliation for Jenna and recognition for Claire created a powerful emotional impact. By the end of the event, the atmosphere was heavy but charged with clarity. Claire had achieved more than she had imagined, justice without cruelty, revelation without lies. She had shifted the balance, not through anger alone, but through truth. And in doing so, she left everyone in the room stunned, reflective, and moved by the strength of a sister who had finally demanded to be seen. After the shocking revelation at the event, Jenna retreated to a quiet corner, her mind spinning. For the first time, she began to see Claire not as the jealous sister she had assumed, but as someone who had carried a heavy burden silently for years. The mistakes she had made, the success she had taken for granted, and the attention she had always received suddenly looked very different. Jenna thought back to moments she had overlooked, times when Claire had stayed up late helping her study, worked tirelessly on projects that Jenna had been praised for, or quietly solved problems that could have caused major trouble. She remembered how Claire had smiled through all the family attention, never complaining, never asking for recognition. All these years, Jenna had assumed Claire's quietness meant indifference or weakness. Now, she realized it had been endurance, patience, and a kind of strength she had never understood. The anger Jenna had felt toward Claire before seemed small compared to the pain she saw in her sister's eyes now. Every harsh word Claire had said, every confrontation, it wasn't just out of envy. It was the result of being overlooked, ignored, and treated as invisible for so long. Jenna felt a deep guilt settle in her chest, heavier than she had ever imagined. Claire had carefully shown the evidence, yes, but more than that, she had revealed the truth about herself, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the constant support, and the hope that someone, anyone, would notice. That was the real reason behind her anger. It wasn't just revenge, it was a desperate cry for acknowledgement, a demand to be seen and valued for all she had done. Jenna began to understand the depth of betrayal Claire had felt, not from her personally, but from the world and the family that had consistently ignored her. It wasn't jealousy that had driven Claire to collect evidence or plan carefully, it was survival and the need to be recognized. Jenna felt her perspective shift completely. The sister she had thought was petty and envious was, in fact, someone who had carried more than she had ever imagined. Tears came to Jenna's eyes as she looked at Claire from across the room. She wanted to speak, to apologize, to make it right, but words felt inadequate. For the first time, she truly saw Claire, not the shadow she had always assumed her to be, but a strong, intelligent, and deeply emotional person who had waited too long for justice. Jenna realized that the story had been flipped entirely. What had looked like malicious revenge now felt like a mirror reflecting years of pain and neglect. Claire's actions weren't cruel, they were necessary for her to reclaim her voice and her place. The realization hit Jenna hard, and the weight of guilt and understanding pressed down on her. This moment changed everything. Jenna no longer saw Claire as an enemy or a rival. She saw her as a sister who deserved recognition, respect, and empathy. And for the first time, Jenna understood the truth behind years of resentment, the reason her sister had hated her, and why Claire's actions, though shocking, had been justified. After the event, the house was quiet, heavy with tension. Claire and Jenna sat across from each other in the living room, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Neither knew how to begin. The confrontation that had erupted in front of everyone had left both sisters shaken, their feelings raw and exposed. Finally, Jenna spoke, her voice trembling. "Claire. I didn't realize. I never knew how much you had sacrificed, how much you carried on your own. I'm so sorry." Her words were simple, but the weight behind them made Claire pause. For years, Claire had longed to be seen, to have her pain acknowledged. And now, Jenna was finally understanding. Claire's own voice shook as she replied. "It wasn't just about being overlooked, Jenna. It was every time I tried to step forward and felt invisible. I supported you because I loved you, but I couldn't keep pretending it didn't hurt." Tears ran down her cheeks as she spoke, her anger now softened by relief and vulnerability. The sisters sat in silence for a moment, letting their emotions settle. The anger and resentment still lingered, but it was now joined by understanding. They had both been hurt, Claire by being ignored, Jenna by realizing she had been the cause of that pain. It was a complicated mix of emotions, but the first step toward healing had begun. Their parents entered the room, faces pale and guilty. They had watched the events unfold, seeing the depth of their favoritism for the first time. We never realized how much we hurt you, Claire," their mother said softly. "We thought we were being fair, but we see now how wrong we were." Their father nodded, his voice heavy with regret. "We took her for granted, and we let our favoritism create a divide between you two. We're sorry." Hearing their parents' confessions added another layer to the sisters' emotions. Claire felt a mix of relief and lingering pain, while Jenna's guilt deepened. She reached out and took Claire's hand, squeezing it gently. "I never wanted to hurt you, Claire. I was blind to everything you did for me. Can you forgive me?" Claire looked into her sister's eyes, seeing genuine remorse. She nodded slowly. "I forgive you, but it will take time for everything to heal. We both have to work on this." The honesty in her words brought a sense of closure to the long-hidden tension, even as it reminded them that rebuilding trust would not be instant. The room felt lighter, though still filled with emotion. Both sisters understood that love and resentment could exist together, and that family bonds were fragile but worth protecting. They realized that pain had been caused not only by their actions but by years of misunderstanding and neglect. As the evening ended, the sisters shared quiet laughter and tentative smiles. The wounds of the past were not erased, but the honesty, apologies, and understanding had begun to heal them. The audience could feel the mix of catharsis, heartbreak, and reflection, knowing that family dynamics, when neglected, could cause deep pain, but with honesty and empathy, reconciliation was possible. After the emotional fallout, Claire and Jenna began the slow process of rebuilding their relationship. It wasn't easy. Trust that had taken years to fracture could not be repaired overnight. Every conversation carried caution, every gesture weighed with meaning. But both sisters were committed to trying. Claire learned to soften her vigilance, while Jenna worked to listen and acknowledge what she had never understood before. Over time, small moments became meaningful. Claire noticed Jenna taking care to include her in decisions, giving credit where it was due, and showing genuine interest in her thoughts and achievements. Jenna noticed Claire's calm strength, her ability to speak up without anger, and her willingness to forgive. These moments were quiet but powerful, forming the foundation of a new relationship built on honesty rather than assumption. Even as progress was made, the scars of the past remained. Claire still remembered the years of being overlooked, the times her efforts went unrecognized, and the frustration of watching her sister succeed while she felt invisible. Jenna still carried guilt, remembering how blind she had been and how her actions, however unintentional, had contributed to Claire's pain. The memories were reminders of what had been lost, but they also became lessons in empathy and understanding. Claire learned that confronting betrayal was never easy. It brought anger, fear, and the risk of further conflict. But it was necessary. If she had stayed silent, her feelings and her life would have continued to be overshadowed. By facing the truth, by standing up for herself, she reclaimed her voice and her presence in the family. The process was painful, but it brought clarity and strength she had never felt before. Jenna, on the other hand, learned that empathy and gratitude were more than words, they required action and awareness. She understood that recognizing another person's struggle, even if it doesn't affect you directly, is essential for maintaining healthy relationships. She also realized that love without acknowledgement can hurt just as much as neglect without love. Her gratitude became genuine, expressed not in gestures alone but in understanding and respect for Claire's experiences. Together, the sisters found a new balance. They were careful with each other's feelings, aware of the past but focused on the future. Their bond was no longer perfect or effortless, but it was honest. They had learned that honesty, courage, and understanding were stronger than blind affection or unspoken resentment. The story of Claire and Jenna shows that the people we love most can hurt us the deepest, sometimes without even realizing it. But it also shows that understanding, communication, and patience can heal even the oldest wounds. Pain, when confronted and acknowledged, can transform into growth. Love, when paired with empathy and recognition, can become stronger than it ever was before. Sometimes, the hardest battles in life are with the people closest to us. Yet by facing the truth and allowing for forgiveness, healing is possible. Claire and Jenna's journey reminds us that scars may remain, but the lessons they carry can guide us toward a deeper, more meaningful connection. In the end, the sisters discovered that honesty, courage, and love together can repair even the most fragile bonds.